Has anyone ever said, you're the picture of health? You look healthy and you feel fine. But that may not be the full picture. Colorectal cancer is the second leading cancer killer of men and women over 50. Doesn't always cause symptoms, but it can be prevented. Get screened. Make sure you are the picture of health.
A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Thank you for tuning in to Rebuilding the Black Family with Pastor Carl Lewis and myself, Clement Humphrey. Rebuilding the Black Family is dedicated to discussing principles essential to building strong, productive, and successful families. Please join the conversation by liking, following, and sharing us from our Facebook page, and that's facebook.com/Foundation for Life Church and facebook.com/SPRLiveFM. Now, let's join Pastor Carl and me, Clement Humphrey. We're in-house. We're in-house. Is that you or me?
Hi there. Too much power there.
Too much power coming through, man. Way too much power. Well, Happy New Year to you, sir.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful past year. How many is it? 6 months? 7 months?
6 months.
6 months that we've been doing the broadcast, and we stepped over into a new year halfway through the year's thing here. So we're doing all well.
All right. Yeah.
I have to say one thing though.
Right.
I was absolutely, how should I say, overjoyed to see. I know you talk about your wife a lot, and to see the combination and the what we call
chemistry.
The chemistry, passing of the baton back and forth to each other. And I was thinking, I'm going to say this on air because now, folks. He's the preacher teacher, but you got to hear his wife. She's the preacher. She is the preacher. Man, she preached up a storm. I'm like,
and she's that's only for
me. I'm telling you, man. I said, but wait a minute here. So he's the preacher teacher, and he's on the subdued side, but she's on fire. I'm like, I like this. I'm like, yeah, I love the chemistry. It's like you just pass the baton, and this is okay. Here's my wife, Colleen. Pastor Colleen. Here you go. Bang, had a pat, and she just took off, and that was it. Yeah. And I loved it. It was powerful. We had a joint service between our church,
which was wonderful,
and Pastor Carl's church, and it was a great time meeting. And I love the topic, kingdom.
Yeah.
It's so amazing that most churches don't preach kingdom anymore. And so to hear kingdom being preached and talked about, I'm like, yeah, this is what we need. And I actually started my show today because I was planning on doing that. Mm-hmm. And when Pastor Burnett started talking about it, I'm like, okay, we didn't have this conversation, but this is a nice trend. And then you came and said, and then Pastor Colleen came up and she spoke about the same kingdom building and kingdom being grace.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, I'm like, wow, this is powerful because most of the times you look around today and there's nothing about the kingdom being preached. Well, we preach about kingdom, but not God's kingdom. Mm-hmm. We preach about building our own little kingdom, as though we're going to be here forever. Mm-hmm. I remember there was a conversation that came up with myself and another brother, and folks hear me, understand me correctly, and we were talking about and I know his name is going to leave my mouth right now. He's from Bahamas. He died in a plane crash. Mm-hmm. That pastor, do you know who I'm talking about? He died in a plane.
Oh, yeah, he's one of the best.
Yes.
You mean Pastor? It's just came in my mouth. Yeah. It'll come to me when I get a gulp here.
Yeah, that's right. And
Dr. Miles Monroe.
And he pretty much he had it all, so to speak, right? But if you backtracked a couple of his messages, just months before that, he spoke about finishing his job. And, this, what he has, is nothing. So he was prepared. And I thought to myself, when I just happened to be scrolling through some stuff, and I said, did you ever notice that his messages prior to his death, he was actually preparing himself without even, he even talked about, I forget the conversation he had with, I think it was an African preacher, talking about preparing for the life after. And these things you have, he says, they're just temporary. And he actually said it. And now today, some preachers get all caught up in, you have to have the big house, you have to have the plane, you have to have the fancy cars, you have to have 3 or 4 or 5 Mercedes and Rolls Royce, and and it gives a false sense of hope to those that don't have. And wanting to know what's wrong with them. Is it they don't have enough faith? I mean, there was a conversation going on Facebook, and the girl said, well, if the man have big enough faith for a plane, why not leave him alone for his plane? I said, but that's not what it is about, right? It's about salvation. It's about the kingdom of God. It's about getting men and women prepared to meet their Savior when the time comes. And it's not about having a $6 million home with a $64 million plane or 35 million Rolls Royce. It's not about that. It's about salvation. It's about the kingdom of God. And are we ready to meet the King?
Well, what you just said, though, is we're making sure we keep the main thing the main thing.
Right.
We could allow things to divide us, though.
Exactly.
For example, let's say you're in a very large house. So suppose someone says, well, Clement, you don't need to live in this size house. You don't need 3 or 4 bedrooms as in this house. You don't need a big house, right? They could say that.
Right.
Well, would that make them right?
No.
So they could say, okay, well, why don't you downsize and live in a 1-bedroom? What I'm saying, sometimes we argue about really things that we shouldn't be.
Right.
The fact is, if someone wants to and can afford whatever multi-million, that's their business.
Right.
That's not my business.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Right.
And sometimes it is a matter of what we aspire for. Some people figure, you know what, that's not a big deal. For example, my daughter, she was saying, Dad, why can't we have a bigger, these big, huge TVs? I told her, you know what, honey, I've never really desired these huge TV, but I believe for her it would make her day.
Yeah.
But not me. What I'm saying, sometimes we argue about our individual and personal likes.
Right. Which has nothing to do.
Exactly. Now, what you just underscored, then, what should be the main thing, regardless of what you drive, what you wear, regardless. That's your choice. You just hit on it at the end of what you just said. Well, it should be: are we winning people to Christ? Are we preparing for eternity?
Right. That's
the key.
Because because the thing is that most of and there's a friend of mine who is teeter-tottering on salvation, so to speak. He says, well, what happened to those guys? I says, listen, I don't care what he drives, what he has a cancer. That's his thing, right? And however he makes his money, that's his thing. But if they're going to preach prosperity gospel only as opposed to salvation, and we talked about this before, how many churches, especially these large churches, do we see having baptism, which means people have received the Lord and then surrendered themselves to Christ and now want to pursue living for Christ? You don't see that a lot. You hear a lot about, grabbing money, getting wealth, getting this, getting that, and minus salvation. And that's always my concern. Like, how many of us are we sending to hell? Not even tell them, listen, the bottom line, baseline is Jesus Christ. Baseline. That's it. Everything else that God has blessed them with, because he said he will bless whom he chooses to bless. Right? So he may decide to keep you in a little mud hut somewhere. It doesn't mean that you're not blessed. It simply means that, because you know what? Going to Kenya, I've never seen people smile and laugh so much like these Kenyans, and they live in mud huts. Not electricity, but candles. Not running water, they have to go and fetch water. And they're the most happiest bunch of people I've ever met. I'm thinking, I look at this, one of the things that strike me, they're always laughing, and you're talking about gut buster laughter. Like, they throw it back and they laugh and they're having fun. And I'm thinking, the simplicity of life, they're cool with that. And the more you get, is the more you're concerned how you can keep it.
Well, when you said that, there's a contentment. That was when you started. I saying they've demonstrated a contentment,
right,
with little, if you will, and that's a relative phrase, of course. So sorry, I'm interrupting.
Yeah. So to me, going into this new year, we all should be kingdom-minded, understanding what the kingdom is about, what God was talking about in terms of when Jesus Christ came and he says, John the Baptist, he says,
Jesus said it in Matthew 4:17.
Exactly. About the kingdom. What is this all about? Is it about building our own little kingdom here? That's what we're supposed to be settling for, or is the kingdom to come? That's my thing that I often look at and say, hey, I wonder if we really paying attention to that especially in this year to come. I want to say good afternoon to our regular happy New Year to you, Peggy, and to Bridget Barrett. Happy New Year to you too as well.
That's good. Did we say Happy New Year to everybody?
We did.
All right. Happy New Year.
We did.
We appreciate you for tuning in, and this year we want to encourage you. Really like the Streaming Praise Radio Facebook page. Also share it with as many friends as possible. Like, share, do whatever you can, follow. Let's really build up the momentum, and let's build the viewership or listenership on both of Streaming Praise Radio and the good work that Claremont is doing on air. So you do that by letting people know about it. So please, let's go tell. If everybody is here tells at least 10, 15, 20 people, and we can really push that. And also Rebuilding the Black Family, please like our Facebook page, Carl Lewis, and also Foundation for Life Facebook page. We also have a website, foundationforlife.ca, a lot of good resources there. But really want to push that, and it's not because we're self-interest, but because we do have a message. I believe God's put us on the air, and He wants not just you to listen, but many others to be hearing to what we've got to say. So
I have to drop this little testimony in here, especially for our Facebook listeners that are locked in. I do the morning show. And I started doing it on Facebook, and I was planning on stop doing it and just stick to the radio thing. Like, we do the Rebuilding the Black Family here, and I'll stick to the radio part and not doing that. And the day that I was contemplating it, though, this might be the last show today. Even though prior to the day before, somebody says, no, don't, that's a good, promotional tool, don't do it. And I said, okay, fine, I'll do it one more day, and then depending how I feel, But when God has a hand on things, He changes things very subtly. Because in the midst of me broadcasting, there's a young lady that came on, and she requested prayer, and she requested some other stuff. And I recognize if I had come off, she wouldn't have had that opportunity, because she was looking and she found, right? And God directed her to us. It's like if God's saying to me, stay right where you're at. You don't move until I tell you to move. So to me, it's like, okay, God speaks in many different forms to me. And this is one of the ways that He said, don't move. Even though I heard somebody else said, don't move, stay where you're at, I was still in my head thinking, man, that's too much work. You got to get this right, you got to set this right, do the fancy stuff. And I'm just kind of scouting around to see what more I can do to make it look a little bit more attractive. It's like you're home, you want to dress it up a little bit, dress it up and do the things you've got to do. And then I was thinking about, maybe time to come off. Leave it for Rebuilding the Black Family. And then the young lady came on and was like, okay, I guess it can reach many different platforms, because not everybody wants to literally lock into the online link, but they lock into this and Facebook, and that's where they still get the word. So that's important.
But you don't know who you're affecting, right?
Exactly.
So just say, and that's the thing, when you're working diligently and obeying God, sometimes you don't immediately see the fruit of your labor. And so it was good the Lord showed you, gave you some fruit, as evidence. It's okay, Claremont, keep it, stay with it.
Stay with it. And in the process of that, and I repeated again this morning, and I think we're going to go back to that, Rebuilding the Black Family, and I said that this morning. Right? And I said, lock into Rebuilding the Black Family, and the little note pop up, Rebuilding the Black Family. Says, yes, the Rebuilding the Black Family is a wide scope. I said, but I'm not going to get into that. I'll let Pastor Carr get it, because I had just gotten a text. I said, let's get into Rebuilding the Black Family, and really hit home what we got to do. No holds barred, no rules in this one. It's a cage fight, so, the last man standing is what hits it. This is how we going for it, I don't know if
you're one of those people that you got to be careful. We don't know about, you have some friends that you don't know what they're going to say, what they might do, But you know what? Like you said,
excuse me.
what we're going to do today, I know we had a long introduction, but it's just to get into the flow of the new year and, just also to relax and to get into this and to welcome you and thank those of you who've been listening week after week. But I'll tell you what we're going to start with is this. We did this at the end of the year, but what we want to pick up on is this, is oftentimes we've heard, and particularly Claremonters, because you're on the air more than I am, on Streaming Praise, people say, well, why rebuilding the black family? And I think the way you've heard it may be about the same way, but it's almost like the main emphasis, if we had just said rebuilding the family, no one has a problem with that. Right. But so I'm not criticizing those of you hearing, please hear my heart on this. And so people say, well, why are you saying black family? That seems to be the bone of contention, if you will, what really gets in some people's craw. And so I want to talk about this program, and we're going to take it on because this is really moving us into our assignment here on Streaming Praise Radio, and particularly Rebuilding the Black Family. So why the emphasis on black family? And so why is it? But let me ask it. I'm going to ask a question with a question. Is this the question? Why is there the difficulty then in accepting such a program title? Okay, is that fair? Why is it? Yeah. Well, this can be difficult. And interrupt me anytime. Okay.
Now, I do want to interrupt you right now by saying this.
I didn't say you have to interrupt me right now.
Because I want you to add this in there.
Yeah.
Rebuilding the black family, and why rebuilding the black family? If we were to look at the news, and man has been shot, or man shot another man, right?
You're going to say something that I was going to bring up, but go ahead.
Right.
Yeah,
it just says that.
Yep.
So we don't have to wonder who they're saying is a man, because if they want to be specific as to what type of man it was, they will say black man did X, Y, Z. Or, as the new thing now, brown man did X, Y, Z. But when they say man, we know exactly who they're talking about. So we're building the black family. What's wrong with that?
So remember that example.
Right.
And what you just said.
Right. Okay. I just
want to throw it. But remember that example. It's a great example that really adds to something.
Go ahead.
There's something what you just said there to remember. Now, think about this then. So why sometimes there's a difficulty? Why is there this reticence about that question or that statement, that program title? Why are you calling it Rebuilding the Black Family? So the thing is this. If you're a Christian, you've often heard people say, well, God only sees people. And yes, it's true. Acts 17:26 says, God has made from one blood many people. That's interesting because it tells us God is a God of diversity.
Correct.
He never just saw one color. So he sees many people, many colors, but one people. That's true. But the thing is this, oftentimes people will say this, Christians will say this, all Jesus sees is the blood. You've heard that too, right?
Yeah.
Just the blood of Jesus, and all he sees is that we're in the family of God. Right? I'm just being honest now.
Yeah.
And guys, text us, send us a question or a note or feedback, please. We want to make sure that we're not just talking, but that what we're hearing is connecting with you. So your feedback, I'm telling you, is received with the right heart. So now, I used to wonder. I'm telling myself. I used to wonder because you understand, sometimes we're a reflection, or sometimes we're a result of our background.
Right.
And so please understand, I've been a Christian for many years. I know more and more who I am in Christ. But understand this, I used to even wonder, Claremont, well, why do you have to have Black History Month? This is me talking.
Yeah.
This is me now.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I'm just being honest with you. You asked the question.
Yeah.
All those friends, all those people have asked you the question.
Yeah. Right.
So we've got to be honest here. I'm just being transparent. So now, when I said, so the question, why when I used to think, just like some of you, why Black History Month?
Right.
You bring that up, you're dividing us, right? Because that's a part of that premise.
Correct.
When you say black family, well, you're dividing us. We're just family. Just hear me on this. Or when you mention black, you must be an angry person. You're an angry black person. You're just an angry person who hates people who are different color than you. Why don't you just think about it? I'm just saying now. You're just another extremist.
Correct.
And you notice we're afraid of extremists, by the way, because they're unpredictable.
Right.
Now, and that means you're another extremist we should ignore and just put aside.
Correct.
Because they're not normal. They're not like the rest of us.
Right.
Okay. Another point. You're hate-filled. You're unforgiving. Right? You're just forgiving. You're not just, we've moved on from that.
Yeah.
That's all the premise of this, all that, right? We've moved on from that. Why don't you just forgive and move on?
Correct.
Am I correct so far?
Yeah.
I hope, give me some feedback, folks. That's part of what's behind this stuff. Now, are we ready?
Yeah.
Okay, we're jumping in with both feet.
Right.
Just like some of those people in Calgary, usually in Toronto, they have the polar bear dip.
Polar bear dip, yeah.
I think they canceled it this year because of the
extreme cold. Yeah.
But in Calgary, they were bragging because they said they still had theirs. Of course, some people had full clothes on and all that. Italy, they were jumping off. 4 guys were jumping off a bridge every year. But that wasn't. I think it was nice, warmer weather than here. But anyway, to answer this question now. Why the emphasis? We need to address the purpose of our program. And so the purpose of our program, now hear me, you mentioned the kingdom of God, is to proclaim the gospel of the kingdom of God to the black nation. And to teach principles essential to building strong families. Right? But those principles, though, they are essential in creating good families of any color. Right? Mm-hmm. But the thing is this. I thought about this. Let me write something I thought about. We cannot effectively do this if we ignore the setting in which we live.
Absolutely.
So think about this now. We live in an environment. We live in a certain culture. We have a certain history. If we don't address, or if we ignore how we got here, then you're going to do a disservice.
Right.
Now it's interesting, the Apostle Paul, he says this to Timothy. He said, bring with you the parchments. That thing that always intrigued me. See, Paul had an understanding of his history. He had an understanding of the people he was sent to.
Right.
Jews and Gentiles.
Right.
So he could speak to them intelligently. And so I'm just kind of creeping up to where I want to get to here.
I'm waiting. You're
waiting, right? So now, we need to, though, get this. We need to have a real desire for the truth.
Correct.
And often, I'm just telling on ourselves, oftentimes, the truth can be very uncomfortable. Now, I'd say, so think about this now. Yes, we're preaching the gospel. I'm not ashamed of it. That's my call. I'm called to preach the gospel. But I've been transparent in telling you some of the things I had to go through and being honest with you because, let me just say this. I'm going to talk to you about some symptoms of our environment. I'm going to talk to you about some symptoms of what we're dealing with, and I hope this makes sense. Remember we said last year, the young black woman, think about this now, young woman, black woman, who believed she was ugly simply because of her shade.
That's right.
And my question, and it just stuck with me, who told her she was ugly? I'm going somewhere with this, but right now I'm talking about some symptoms that we often ignore. And see, the gospel will address things, but we need to know what we're addressing.
Correct.
Now, why would Jesus say this? To preach the gospel to the poor, to heal the brokenhearted, deliver to the captives. Now, the thing is this. Okay, now listen to this now. So, the young black woman who believed she was ugly, right? I'm just going to give a few symptoms now of our environment. Some of the symptoms of, we could say, the black nation, but even larger, North America then.
Correct.
Let's say the inordinate number of black men in our prison system. Just symptoms so far. Okay? The self-hate that is often very evident in the black community. Some of that is evident by black on black crime. Why a person of color, let's say outside of, most sports and entertainment, why are they identified as a black person? For example, I was just reading an article with my daughter. I was at the car dealership, and it was a young up-and-coming golfer. And she's supposed to be a breakout, really doing really well. But it's a young person, about in the 1920. And so she got endorsements recently. Now, she was identified as a black golfer.
Not a golfer.
Not a golfer. Now, that's why all these people tell me that why the emphasis, you're trying to divide us now. She said this in closing. I'm hoping that I can be an example to other people of color, and that we'll finally get to the time when people like me won't have to be identified by color.
Good statement.
Isn't that interesting?
Good statement.
So now, the stereotypes that are continually reinforced. Another one. I just read an article about yesterday or 2 days ago. There's a white couple, very, really goodwill, a wonderful-hearted couple. They adopted a black children. I think a couple of black children. Now, again, this is all symptomatic of our environment. Why did they mention in the article black children?
Distinction.
Do you see what I'm saying now? Now, all of that, I could go on and on and on and on. I could. Now, another thing is this. There's some things that push me over, such as that young woman who thought she was black. And I'm going to get into some of the whys and why we have to address this. And the gospel really does address this. Another big one, though, that pushed me over the last couple of years is this. When I recognize the number of black young men who either were believing in Jesus and put him aside, no longer believe in him, no longer live for him. Think about this now. Or black men who don't want to hear anything about Jesus. Now, hear what I'm about to say here, folks. Now, because that's a huge one. So, rejecting the gospel of Jesus Christ, and if you talk to them honestly, those of you will be honest with you, because when they started understanding history, real history now, and they were comparing, and they were seeing the pictures of Jesus and what was put forth as Jesus, they're believing, I'm just saying, I've had a conversation with some men about this, they're believing that the Jesus we preach is a white Jesus, or a white man's Jesus. These are all symptoms. I'm just symptoms. These are not solutions I'm talking about so far. These are all symptoms. Are we okay on that so far?
Yep, we good.
All right, we're good. If you can handle it, they can handle it.
Listen, okay. I was going to jump right there. Yeah. What were you saying that when they believe in a white Jesus? Now, keep in mind, going back to slavery.
Yeah, we're going to get to that. I'm going to get to that.
All right.
I'm going to get to that.
I'm going to leave that alone.
I'm going to get that. So the thing is this then. So much of how you're going to understand then why we're dealing with coming from it from a certain angle is this, is that I believe some things we're going to say is we're going to be seen as controversial. I don't see it as such because it can be validated by fact and truth very simply. But the thing is this, oftentimes we're speaking to people who have erroneous premises in their minds. We're thinking wrong. And so now let me talk about what's behind much of this premise. Am I making sense so far?
Yes,
you're here to make sure that we're good. All right? Now think about this. The black nation, or black people in the Caribbean, in North America, in much, let's say, so it's Canada, the U.S., South America, Central America, the Caribbean, different parts of the world. We're a colonized people.
Right.
Now hear me on this, because you're going to say, what is after the gospel? I'm going to get to it. We're a colonized people. We are children of a colonized people. We're children of slaves. Now, the thing is this, though, what sometimes we miss, I think we overlook, Clement, is this, respectfully, is this. We don't realize and maybe appreciate enough that people who've been colonized, people who've been enslaved, their mentality oftentimes, their psyche, sometimes, not all the time, has been so warped sometimes that it hinders us often from fulfilling our true potential. And I don't think we realize that enough.
It's true.
I could go back to that young girl. Beautiful young girl. But over time, all her span of understanding history is so limited. Impressed upon her mind was a standard of beauty that was never probably used for hundreds of years. Or before her lifetime. Or before what we call slavery. We're going to get into this. Now, let me get into this. Now, let me say this also. I'm going to get into something about kingdoms now.
Right.
No kingdom of man is perfect, pure, full of truth, everlasting, or permanent. Now, I'm going somewhere on this. Because we've got to get into this thing, which is really important. Jesus said this. You see it in Matthew chapter 4, Luke chapter 4, Mark chapter 1. He was tempted by the devil. Most Christians have read this, but I want to show you something the Lord showed me some time ago that really cleared things up for me. It says, Jesus, in one of the temptations, it says this: Satan took Jesus up into a mountain and he showed him all the kingdoms, plural.
Yes, that's absolutely true, yes.
In a moment of time. And he said to him, all these things I'll give to you. So we know that was a true statement.
Correct.
So now think about this. Whether it's Nimrod's kingdom, whether it's the Babylonian kingdom, whether it's the Egyptian kingdom, whether it's the Medo-Persian kingdom, whether it's the Roman Empire, and we're still in the end part of that right now. That's what I think. Regardless of all these kingdoms, these are all kingdoms of man.
Correct.
Now, God still operated his plan through those kingdoms, but we could say this: these were not God's kingdom. That's really, really important.
Yes.
To what I'm about to say. Hear me carefully on this now. So now, this is the big one. This is where I want to get to now. Let's bring it to several hundred years forward now. Let's come up a little bit closer. So the present kingdom, I'm going to call it a kingdom we're in right now, in the North American kingdom, is the, let's say North America. If we want to truly understand, we've got to understand North American history correctly.
Correct.
So I'm going to call it the last 400 years we're in. I'm going to call it a kingdom. Every kingdom was based on something. The Egyptian kingdom, notice Egyptian. Everything was based on something. Now we've been in a kingdom, and the predominant, we could say, force of this kingdom that we're in, this earthly kingdom right now, is based on white supremacy and racism.
Correct.
Now I've got to call it that.
Yeah,
listen.
it's true.
Now, you got to understand now, and you can look into that. Now, we were taught, think about this now. Growing up in Canada, let's say in high school, when I came here, I took Canadian history. If you're born in America, you took American history. I also had the privilege in grade 12 of taking American history.
Right.
Now, what's interesting, if all you know is what the Canadian or American system taught you in school, your knowledge of history is at best misinformed, and at worst you are deceived, because it lacks so much of the actual truth.
Yeah.
So now what's saying? Now get this now. And again, this is not when we bring some of this stuff up, people might think you're hateful. No, we must be willing to hear the truth. If you don't, and I know, and sometimes it's painful, or people will say this, if you bring this up, you're hating on people. No, we're not hating on people. And if you've heard me long enough, people who know me, there's when we talk about rebuilding the black family, I talk about our personal responsibility. There's a whole lot of principles we're going to really talk about, our personal responsibility. We start up by talking about how strong we are with black men. With men, it starts with us. We've got to be strong. We've got to be faithful to our women. We've got to raise our own children. We've got to have good education.
Correct.
But you see, people can say all this stuff. Please understand this. You cannot just be completely honest. I used to listen to a more of a right-wing conservative station. But then I started listening to them really carefully. And it's a pop. If I mention it, you'd all know it. But I started noticing certain patterns. They would always, anytime they mentioned black people, it was in a negative tone.
Yes.
They would never say nothing. But I never said President Obama. He was more socialistic, and some things he did, he had to cater to some of his base. He did that. But you know what? Every time they never mentioned, I'm just telling you as far as what I heard, they never mentioned anything positive about him.
No, they didn't.
Then I started realizing, well, who's financing this? And then I saw, there was a pattern.
Correct.
Now I can't listen. In good conscience, I don't listen to that station. For this reason, because I know their agenda. And to me, their agenda is really impure and wrong. You see, and very self-centered. So think about this now. I'm getting to where I'm getting to now here. So this kingdom that we've been, again, I said this part. Was I saying this part about our history, understanding our history correctly? And that understanding, and we say, well, what does this have to do with where we are? It has everything to do with where we are today. When you can understand the real history of North America, you can see what has happened to much of the black nation. I'm gonna give some examples. People say, well, black people, you're supposed to just, you've heard the saying, pick yourselves up by your own bootstraps and your own laces. Well, I heard someone say something that was really good, and this was someone who's in one of the top 1% in American prosperity. So this guy is something else.
Right.
Well, he said something very enlightening. He said, you know what? Well, because they're trying to do their part in helping to elevate the black nation. And he said, well, what if you never had any boots or no laces? See, so we're making assumptions all the time. Well, see, you got to understand then, so the black man was taken into this nation. Think about this now. Given no land, given no property, given no reparations, didn't even have ownership of his person. I think like for 250 years or so. And then after that, you understand, even in the prison system, you understand how all that was created. When you understand these things, it changes your mind on a whole lot of stuff. Absolutely. So then when you think about, let's say, even why do you think it's hard for them to change even the law? Our judicial system, because inherent in it, if you were a non-person to begin with, remember, and I told someone, I was speaking to some ministers I know, and I said to them, you do realize it was a white group of ministers, and I said to them, you do understand why the black vote, blacks only got the vote just over 50 years ago? When they looked, that was a shock to them. Obviously it's something they don't think about.
No.
You see that? They never thought, because it doesn't really concern them. So then you got to understand all these things. Even, let's say, the ability to acquire land, the ability to pass on property. How do you pass on to your next generation what you don't own? Now you see, so all of these things, if we're not willing to address these things, or at least talk about them intelligently without thinking that someone is being hateful, all I'm just is putting out facts. I'm just presenting it to you. What you do with it is your business. But you understand, when I understood that, I started realizing I had a greater empathy, a greater compassion, a greater desire to see our people elevated. That's my motivation. That's my motivation. But if we don't address that, it means a lot of times either we don't know or we don't care. And as for me, we're going to do our part to make sure we not only inform, but we inspire and we help God's people, the black nation, to become what they're supposed to be. Now, let me say this other thing too. Think about this now. I got to say this as I put a note for myself. So let's think about this. I said this. I need to say this part. So North America was built, as it is today, it was an expansion of Europe.
Correct.
Right? So expansion of Europe.
Right.
And so the British, the French, and the Spaniards, they're the first, those are the main ones we could say. So they came, and what they were doing on representing their respective monarchies, they were expanding their kingdoms. Right? So now, what I need to say is this. God never planned, God was not behind the enslavement of black people. Now, we got to say that loud and clear, because it's amazing how people think. So, because some people just think, well, just because something was, that it was God's plan. Now remember, God in His sovereign, God in His foreknowledge, He sees ahead and He knows, well, this action is going to produce this, and that's going to happen. And also, we should say this, every civilization that's been in power, including, we could say, kingdoms that were black, enslaved other people.
That's right.
They've all done
it too, yeah.
Right? And that's that whole thing, that Shakespeare said, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and that's part of that whole thing. And again, that's the heart of man. That's why we need redemption. We need Jesus. We need to be born again. But the thing is this. Understanding then, we were colonized. Well, this continent was an expansion of Europe. And then understanding then, what was we could say the strongest force, or I should say this, go back a little bit. It's interesting, I think it was in the 1860s, that black people and poor white people got along real well?
Yes, that is true. Yeah.
Some of them intermarried.
That's true.
It's interesting. In fact, some people who went back to Liberia, Africa, were mixed couples. Some people who went to Africa, and I think Liberia and other African countries from Britain, we're talking over 100, 200 years ago, they were mixed couples.
Right.
Think about that now, mixed couples. So you understand though, so the color issue, and I know, so we don't want to, God is not big on us mentioning it. You know, that's not supposed to be our major, and that's not what we're majoring on. But we're saying it for a reason. It became an issue because of power. The government, they realized if we can make sure, let's let the white poor people, let's make them think they're better than the black people so we can oppress black people, and we can make sure we've got a continued labor force.
Right.
Right? And we can also rob black people of land, of property, and also politically, think about this now, we've gained another group of people who will keep us in power.
Correct. Exactly.
Now think about what we're trying to say here. You realize a lot of those things are still in place. A lot of those motivations, and that's probably a better word, is still in place. So we've got to, that's why we have to talk about this. Am I talking with hate?
Absolutely.
Vitriol? No, that kind of stuff. No, absolutely. Love. But we're addressing some of these things so we can understand where we are today. Now, so let me say this part here. I need to, let me say this. I need to say this part. So there's been the whitewashing of history. Now, when I think about this now, when I was studying Canadian history, when I studied American, when they told me American is what they taught from their textbooks, they never told you the truth.
No. Why?
Now think about this. They never told you that the white man, I'm going to say when I'm white now, I'm just saying that's the way it was. Oh, let me tell you another reason why we want to ignore this. Because people of color, get this now, they want you to feel bad about bringing this up.
Right.
And people say this, listen, understand, I'm not prejudiced. Please understand. I don't mean saying that doesn't mean much, but anyway. But think about this. You know, if you're white, you're feeling, well, we don't want you putting this guilt on us.
Right.
We're not putting the guilt on you. We're just reporting history the way it should have been told. So we should have been told. You never saw in the history book, they never told me this, that the white man broke every covenant with the brown man, with the Indian man. When he came on this land.
Yeah.
Broke every single covenant.
Yeah.
You hear what I'm saying here?
And those went down to the West Indies too, same thing.
Broke every covenant. Every covenant. Stole his land. Enslaved his people. Think about this. I mean, had free labor for hundreds of years. Built your economy on the backs of another people who you refuse to give citizenship. Think about this. And that you could have, you owned people. You could think about this now. When you understand this now, why we have to talk about this as a man of color, then what you do have to guard against hate and bitterness rising up in you. But you understand now, I'm a forgiving man. And we've got to walk in forgiveness. You can't talk about this and grow in this as a kingdom person and do it from a spirit of unforgiveness. So please understand this. But it is to make sure we understand what you're dealing with.
Exactly.
And you can understand how to help your fellow, let's say, black person who sometimes is dealing with things that came from their past that sometimes they don't understand why they're dealing with this stuff.
You know, if I could go back a little bit to what you're talking about, enslavement mentality, thinking. I was at 2 years ago, I was at a Black History Month celebration, and there was a doctor there, right here out of Canada. He was from Nigeria, if I'm not mistaken. He's one of the top doctors, ex-kids, as far as I think. And he was talking when he went to England to study, and he says he didn't understand this until he actually was involved. Like he said, I went there, I saw them as equal as I am. Because he says, I was never enslaved. My mental thinking was never entrapped in anything. I was free. So he says, I was a free black man walking into an environment that they still see black people as enslaved. So he says, when they spoke to me, he would look at them and think, what are you talking about? Now, other black folks are looking like, you can't do that.
Exactly.
Right? So it's a mental thing with us. Changing the mental perspective of who we are and what we are is a whole lot. Now, for me personally, I grew up, most of my life, I grew up in South America, Guyana. I didn't grow up during slavery time. I grew up in a free time where everything was run by black folks or Indian folks, whatever you want to call it. So in the sense of, I didn't know what racism was about. I've experienced that. But in terms of being enslaved, it was a totally, completely different thing. So when I came to Canada, and I approached things, I had no fear of the fact that as a white man I have to be subjective. No, right? Because put it this way, my godmother was of a Portuguese descent to us, white man, right? So she was like my godmother. We get along just as equals in family, right? Exactly. So when I came in here, I saw the same thing. So, and my mother being part Amerindian too, is that I saw another side of it. So, to me, when I came in here, and everybody seemed to be, some black people, you see how they behave and operate around white folks. I'm thinking, why? But you understand that racism exists. I've experienced that even by cops stopping me on the road, right? I was working at a particular company, and I was the youngest black supervisor in the company. And I walked in, and the guy said to me, the thing was, I had on a blue top which matched the color of the cleaners. He says, "Oh, the cleaning staff was down the other hall." I said, "No, I'm in the right room." And they're looking at me because it's the first time they've ever had a black supervisor in their company.
Gotcha.
So I sat down, and when they came for the conference and introducing all of us because we were new to the company, and he said, "I'm Claremont from XYZ," and I'm like, he says, "How do you find it?" I said, "Well, contrary to popular belief, I'm not the cleaning staff. I am a supervisor from XYZ," and they all looked at me, and the head man kind of looked, why did I say that? So he had a conversation with me afterward. He said, "Well, when I walked in, they thought I was part of the cleaning staff." And he said, "Why would they think that?" And I said, "Why would they think that?" I said, "Look at me. What do you see?" He says, and he was blown away because he's white and he's not even thinking that. It's not crossing his mind at all. I said, "First of all, I'm young, I'm black." And he says, "But that shouldn't mean anything." It says, "To them, it meant something." He says, "Wow." But I understood later on why he thought that way, because his daughter was married to a black man. So his whole perspective of mental is totally different. So he could not comprehend. And just the other day too, I was in a store, and it's interesting how you pick up these little things. I was in the store, and I'm going to say a white brother came, and I kind of bumped him accidentally. I said, "Sorry, man." He said, "Hey, bro, no problem, man." And I thought to myself, the first thing he hit me and says, "Either he has a lot of black friends, or something of that nature," because his response to me was warm. It was one of understanding, because he looked like a skinhead to me, right? And I'm thinking, there's something different about this brother, but I can't figure out what it is. I said, anyways, but thank God, we kind of laugh, talk, joke around a little bit. We were trying to buy the stuff. And later on, I coming out to the store, what do I see? Him and his wife with a little baby. His wife is black. So it's a mindset. And if we can get the mindsets of these young black males to change, you're talking about, they see a white Jesus, and they understand. I came out of that era where my buddies were saying to me, "I don't believe in no white man God." And you tried to convince them it's not a white man God. This was a painting that was used over the years to depict what Jesus Christ looked like. Come on, study the history and understand what it's about. So I grew up in that era where people were trying to switch things and trying to get their minds changed. But I guess media, and I thank God that we have this media to really educate and enlighten people of what it is, because media also pumps that and brings that division among nations. We just the other day we were looking at our coat of arms for Guyana. It says six people, 6 races, 1 nation. That's our coat of arms, right? Because we have 6 different nations, but this is considered as 1 nation. So, and I look at it and I thought to myself, wow, this is what we're supposed to be. Unfortunately, we don't function that way.
Well, see, the more what our Christ-like influence in the earth. Remember, we represent another kingdom.
Correct.
See that? And so that's why we can say this very boldly without fear of that, well, we're being prejudiced or we're trying to, divide people. Is the more, and you gave some good examples of different people you are relating to, of color.
Right.
And so, yes, a similar kind of background where, because of my upbringing, I was born in England, some things were, when I went into certain black communities, it was different because I saw people take on with a certain mindset that was more one of a servitude. People who didn't think they could do certain things. And the thing is, when you grew up in a classroom and you figure, well, you did just as good as people of other colors, did good or better.
Even better.
You didn't have those mental blocks. But what I'm saying here is this, is for us to ignore a lot of these things, I think, is to our detriment. Yes. For an example, if we say this, you're going to understand this. And again, it's not to be negative against anything or anyone, but you need to understand there's a system in this kingdom, talking in this kingdom of man. And again, America's original sin, white supremacy and racism. It used Christianity.
Correct.
So I'm just, you see, this is all part of this that we've got to, and that's why when people see this stuff, it would turn them off of the real Jesus. You see, because they've never seen the real Jesus. Because sometimes they think he's hateful.
There's a movie that came out a couple of years ago, 12 Years of Slave. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie.
I heard about it.
Yeah, I saw it. And a couple of my buddies, my black buddies, saw it too, right? And came out with more hatred than anything else. And I said, two things popped in my mind. Was this deliberately set to create that?
Oh, I see.
Or was it set to bring a clarity and understanding to what actually happened to us back in the day? And one of the statements that was used, and because one of my buddies said to me, he says, that's the reason why I don't believe in no Jesus and no God, because in there, the white guy said to the black people, he says, the Bible says, servants obey your masters. Now you are my servants and you gotta obey me. And he was beating the daylights out of them, right? So he said, I said, hold on a minute. You gotta understand, even the devil have his own tricks. And he's gonna use something like that. I said, understand what happened. And take from it, like the Jews took for their how many years in their 400 years in this thing, when they says, is it 400 years? No, the Jews were the Germans.
About 6 million Jews.
6 million Jews, right? And they come in and says, never will this happen again. But I said, they were so good in dividing us. And the thing is, to slavery, when we came into slavery, it didn't take from one area only, it took from several different areas. So there was language barriers, there was understanding of the different types of cultures within the communities and all these things, and they messed us up by taking away our identity, so we didn't know who we were. So they did a good job on us. I said, as my mother would say, they did a number on us, right? And I said, so now you go watch a movie and you come out and now you're thinking to yourself, well, that's why I don't believe in the Bible thing. Look what this guy's saying. This. I said, understand what they did. And how they used it.
And I would say, understand that the heart of these men was desperately wicked.
Yes.
Now think about
they
what
did what they wanted.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Well, think about this now. It's one thing for you to do it, but then it's another thing for you to use God's name and say that He sanctioned this.
Yes, exactly.
You see, so that's part. Isn't that okay? The Crusaders, they had crosses on their shields. It said. In the Middle East. So all these people then, can you imagine Muslims being slaughtered in the name of God? In the name of our God. No, that wasn't God. That wasn't. No, these were selfish, perverted people who wanted their own will. Who will, listen, so use God to enslave people for what purpose? For their own riches.
Great.
Remember, the love of money is the root of all evil, Scripture says. So their selfishness, that's why I can tell people unequivocally, listen, North America has never been a Christian nation. I know people are going to take contention with that. Can I prove it to you? To be a Christian nation, as they say, if they want to be consistent, whoever believes that, it means you'd have to have a Christian government. Now, to have a Christian government, it would have to be a government that represents or mirrors the same kind of government that's in heaven right now.
Amen.
Now, the same nature. And what's God's nature? Love.
Bottom line.
See that? Now, the thing is this. What you've had are, we could say, governments of the Christian religion, but even that, I call it Christianism. Think about this now. Where in the country, you had significant, let's say, populations of Christian people. But doesn't mean the nation was Christian. Now think about this now. Were they Christian? That's mean even after what America calls founding fathers, what we call founding fathers. Now see, I know people, it's a hard time. The truth is hard to get. It's hard to handle sometimes. But think about this. Can you call a man who will have a wife but rape another woman, is he a godly man? Yes or no? Can we classify him as a Christian?
But do I say he is?
No. He can, no. He can say he is. He can say he is, but we're not going by what he said.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's what we're trying to say here. So you can understand we've been really duped about this stuff here. But you see, when it comes into this stuff now, so then let me give you an example. So, you really get us into this stuff here. But anyway, we want to get in here because it's so important. Because number one is this: God is tired of being misrepresented.
Oh yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we've got to call it for it is, not because we're mean. But it's amazing when I say the people that are upholding all these certain people, how righteous, how godly. I just have to say this. How can you say you're righteous and godly and you can lynch a man? You can kill a man. Think about this. You could be
God, eh?
And I think in the same Bible, New Testament,
right,
that says, "Love your wife as Christ loved the church." Right? Love.
Yeah.
But you can listen. You're not just but you're going to steal another man's wife because she's your property.
That's right.
Now, I know this stuff is uncomfortable, and you can rape her.
Yeah, because they can.
And you can steal. And listen, you can divide families. Listen, you can kill a man. Now, let me tell you, this is not. Now, listen. Now, do you know what some of the history actually tells us? Actual fact. This is hard. Not just men were hanged, women were hanged.
Oh, yeah.
Now, let me tell you another one. If you got children, put it on mute. But this is what they also did was this. Can you imagine babies being cut out of a woman while she's hanged?
Yeah.
A pregnant woman.
Yeah.
Now, this is serious stuff. So that's why we're talking about now. People calling themselves Christian. No. Call them something else, but not a Christian. I hope we kind of help to settle the issue. Why the black family? Now, what I want to get to some of this is this. Why we said all that is to get to some of these things. That history of being children of an enslaved people, children of a colonized people, does affect the mentality. I'm telling you how you see yourself. Now, and so, let me give you an example. Did you notice in the U.S. elections, I think if I'm not correct, if I'm mistaken, either correct me yourself or someone send me the right numbers. 94% of black women and about 85 to 86% of black men voted for the Democratic Party.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Think about that.
Yeah.
Now, those are very high percentages. Now, are we saying, think about this now, all of those people are, because I've heard people say this, well, if you didn't vote for the Republican Party, it means you're not for the family, because
right,
oftentimes the Democratic parties have been more liberal.
Right.
Well, the thing is this: no, it just meant that oftentimes people of color they're more understanding and of their history.
Exactly.
It's closer to their hearts.
True.
Now, what it's also showing is that oftentimes what is not your history, you're not as sensitive to. Are we finished?
Oh my goodness.
It's my fault today.
That's all right. We will pick this up next week. And
I wonder why I'm looking over your shoulders, because the clock's in front of me, but by habit I look over his shoulder because there's a clock right here in the studio here.
But we'll pick this up next week. Good topic. Thank you guys for locking in. Thank you guys for watching us.
Share, pass the word on.
Yeah.
If it's helping you, send us a comment. We'd love to have it. I'm sorry for blaming him, but whatever. But
I can handle it. But in any case, I want to say to you guys, listen, this is the reason why we believe in rebuilding the black family. They need to know the truth. They need to understand the truth. They need to have their mindset changed in order for them to really understand the concept of who God really is. If they believe that God is a white man's God and not God is God of every nation, then we lose them.
That's it.
Until next time, folks.
God's richest and best be yours. And build your family on the sure foundation of Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Thank you for joining us today on Rebuilding the Black Family with Pastor Carl Lewis and myself, Claremont Humphrey. We trust you found this program helpful. Please give us your feedback on our Facebook page, Foundation for Life Church. Also, visit us at foundationforlife.ca, where you will find some free life-building resources. Join us next time for another edition of Rebuilding the Black Family. Until then, build your life and family on the sure foundation of Jesus Christ.